Detroit Lions at the Chicago Bears Sunday at 1. Lions favored by 6.5. Of course, they're 12-2, trying to hold the number one seed opportunity here. They're going to be playing Minnesota week 18. Three teams at 12-2 in the NFC. Bears haven't won since, I don't know, way before the election or something. They're 4-10. It's been a while for Chicago here.
Yeah, and if you remember this game, it was Thanksgiving, right? Where the
Yeah.
first half was one of the biggest beatdowns of any game in the season. Like the Detroit Lions were absolutely annihilating Chicago. I think it was 18 first downs before Chicago recorded their first down in the game. And then somehow in the second half, like they fumbled before going in for yet another touchdown, and somehow the game was just within reach by the time it reached halftime, despite it being an absolute one-sided blowout. And then somehow in the second half, Chicago kept chipping away and bringing it back, and they did get it pretty close to the point where they then butchered the time at the end of the game. Since that, Chicago's defense has definitely played worse. The offense has been all over the place. And Detroit's defense has been getting ever more beat up. So I generally think that we're going to see something much more akin to the first half of that game than the second half. But the Lions' defense is way more damaged than it was at that point, as is Chicago. So it's like the Lions are still a much better team, but they are way more banged up on defense.
Yeah, and I know you wanted to spend a whole show reading quarter splits and how this team is in the first quarter versus the fourth quarter and everything. And the analyst in me says, oh, they're all small sample sizes. How much do you make of this? But every single week, I don't know what the tally is right now in recent games, but at one point, Chicago is being outscored like 55-10 in the first half over a 4-week period. Didn't get any better last week against Minnesota. I could easily see the same game flow. I could see the same game flow. The only thing that kept Chicago in it was Jahmier Gibbs' fumble,
right?
And they, forced 3 field goals, right, in the red zone. Detroit could have been up by 30 if they just played a little better in the red zone. So I think Detroit's offense is just going to be too much for Chicago. Detroit's defense, it'll be easier to play defense in Chicago than in the Dome against Buffalo. So I don't want to completely overrate that game. And 2 weeks ago, they played really well despite all of their injuries and everything. So I like Detroit quite a bit, and I think they're laser focused coming off a loss with the number one seed on the line over these next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think it'll be a similar game to last time, except I think the Bears, whatever witchcraft they were working with to execute all these comebacks and games they were getting their ass kicked in, I think seems to have worn off. I mean, the Vikings game last week was an example where similar dynamic, right? Not quite as extreme, but the first time they played Minnesota was walking away with that game, and then eventually the Bears were able to create that comeback, got it to overtime, and still lost. This time, it just didn't happen, right? They just did not have the ability to execute that kind of comeback. The offense is not functioning the same way. I kind of feel like the same thing's going to happen this time. Like the Lions offense will just roll. The Bears won't be able to slow them down much at all. And then I don't think, even against a wrecked Detroit defense, I just don't think the Bears offense is going to be able to execute that kind of comeback again.
The other thing to highlight, we've talked about all the injuries on the defensive side of the ball for Detroit. They're also down David Montgomery right now.
Yeah.
And Montgomery...
Is that officially for the year now?
I believe it's officially for the year. What, MCL?
Yeah.
Was it? So, I mean, that's a huge blow because he brings that attitude, the power, tackle breaking ability, but in a different way. I've never really been able to quantify it, but when you think about what the defense has to deal with, the power of Montgomery, the speed, quickness, acceleration of Gibbs, route running of Amon-Ra, size and route running of Laporta, speed of Jamison Williams. You just lose one of those dynamic elements that Detroit's offense throws at you. So can Jahmier Gibbs be productive as a 20 carry guy? Absolutely. But I just think it changes. It's like you're losing a pitch, right? You're losing a change of pace. You're losing a different style to throw at a defense. And Montgomery was kind of a not streaky runner, but when he got going, remember the overtime game against the Rams way back in week 1? It's like we're going to run downhill zone with Montgomery, one cut downhill zone and just attack with power. He was that guy. And so I think you lose a little bit if you're Detroit. And, again, everyone else just has to step up. And I always come back to Goff has to play a clean brand of football, and I think they'll be okay.
I think what you lose is, I don't even know if you lose. So it is an interesting situation because on the one hand, I think you gain quite a lot by just feeding Jahmier Gibbs more. Like I think his explosiveness, his ability to create big plays, particularly behind an offensive line that's really good and able to, pave the way, I think is really powerful. On the other hand, David Montgomery doesn't lose yardage. Like that guy is really good at not getting negative plays, and that has value as well. Again, behind an offensive line that's really good. So I don't know what the net of that is. Like, is that a net positive, your greater chance of explosive plays versus your also greater chance of a negative play, or not even a negative play necessarily, but a failure on offense, right? So maybe a play that gains 1 or 2 yards, which is still a positive play technically, but relative to keeping ahead of the chains, it's a negative play. So I don't know what the answer to that is. Like, it might actually be a net positive for Detroit to simply give the ball to Jahmier Gibbs more, but it might come at the expense of those negative, failing offensive plays.
I was talking on mute.
No.
I think it's a fair point where you're giving Gibbs more opportunities to make big plays. I also think it gives Ben Johnson a chance to get into his bag a little bit more Jameson Williams end around type plays. And I guess my fear is not so much this week, it's down the road, the depth. You're one Jahmier Gibbs injury away from really getting depleted in the backfield. So a little more pressure on everybody. 6.5 is the line here, Sam. Where are you going with this one?
Of course, there's also Ben Johnson, if he needs to, can just dial up some Penei Sewell runs. It's always that option.
I would, put Penei in the backfield. Just make it happen. Get your playmakers into, and then there's going to be some sort of counter to the Dan Skipper in the flat play. They'll have a play off that play. Like they're setting up all sorts of stuff. I do kind of hope it peaks in the Super Bowl with Penei Sewell throwing to Dan Skipper for the game winner or something ridiculous, right?
Penei Sewell with a throwback to Jared Goff, who then throws it to Dan Skipper for the touchdown.
Yeah. Thank you. We're just going to add layers to this.
Or maybe Dan Skipper then executes a rugby pass lateral, hook and lateral to Amon-Ra, who then goes in for the touchdown. There's a lot we can do with this. There really is.
Yeah. We should just make up a new one and just add more elements to it every single week leading up to the playoffs.
Love it.
I'm going to go 6.5. Where are you going?
I'm going with the Lions to cover that. I believe the Bears have run out of gas, and I think the Lions, even with a banged-up defense, are still going to have way too much.
Really quick, did you see the Caleb Williams, slouching on the sideline thing? There's been a lot of talk about his body language, not just this year, but in previous years. Do you buy into any of that stuff? He's worn out, he's tired, he's frustrated, or is it just everyone would be frustrated at that point? We all show it differently.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's two different elements to that, right? There's what is the body language, and then there's is it problematic? I
can't believe I asked this. I hate body language analysis.
Well, this was Jay Cutler, right? Remember, Jay Cutler used to always get that. Like, Jay Cutler's body language was always atrocious. And the question was, does that matter or not? I think
if it shows in your play, right? Like, Jay Cutler played like he shrugged his shoulders. Like, whatever, there's a safety there, I'm just going to chuck it anyway. Like, he played like his bad body language. I think there's other quarterbacks who play like when they have a bad press conference, they kind of play like that.
But
maybe
this
too
is
emotional, whatever. I think so I don't know if I've seen that from Caleb Williams yet. I don't think I've seen it in his play.
But this is like you rewrite history according to the circumstances. It's like
Absolutely.
Like Baker Mayfield and Joe Burrow share a lot of commonalities in terms of attitude and feistiness, and Joe Burrow, it's always a positive because he's almost always spectacular. Baker Mayfield goes between like amazing, terrible, anything in the middle, and whether or not his attitude is a problem depends on what version of Baker you are currently experiencing, right? Which I think is just, that shouldn't happen. I don't think you should be changing your analysis based off the outcome.
You did it this weekend. You're like, Mac Jones celebrates too much. What if he's just a fiery guy? He's excited to be playing football on a Sunday.
Well, I just think he's always like that and shouldn't be. That's slightly different.
You should have some self-awareness that you're not good and you shouldn't have fun playing football. I got it.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. For this one, look, at the time they were zooming in on this, he was getting his ass killed by that Minnesota Flores defense. And I think that was a very genuine reflection of how he was feeling at the time, which is, I'm getting wrecked out there. This kind of sucks right now. And I don't really have a problem with that. I don't actually know whether that has some kind of impact on teammates. Like, I don't know if that has some kind of subconscious effect where you look over your quarterbacks like slouched on the thing, buried, exhausted, feeling the weight of the game that he's currently experiencing. Are you like, man, we are kind of getting our ass kicked out here? And does that feed into a self-perpetuating cycle? I don't know the answer to that. So I don't have a massive problem with him doing it because I think it was an honest reflection of exactly what he was feeling at the time and a justifiable one, right? Like, it's not like he did that after one sack where everything had been going pretty well. He was getting wrecked at that point and he felt it and he expressed it. And I'm okay with that. And I don't have an answer to the question of whether or not that actually does anything.
Great. Glad I brought it up. Terrible idea to bring it up. We're all taking Detroit to cover the 6.5 here.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.